Hey guys, Dee Williams here. We are now on part 4 of the individual Audacity documentary, which is my life story, at least up to a certain point. And this is part 4 of 9 parts. So you are in the right space. I want you to tag a friend, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and let's get into part 4. So my place was pretty big. I had burgundy floors. They were painted burgundy, and I never forget one night I was laying in the bed and I was having this dream that I was being eaten by a rat. And I woke up kind of like in a cold sweat at the thought of being eaten by a rat. But when I opened my eyes, to get my air, I looked up and me and a rat were actually like sitting face to face. It was like, what the hell? And I mean, I screamed, I like threw it off of me and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I looked over and there was a rat sitting on my son he was so little I didn't want to take him out the chair. And he was sitting in his chair asleep, and a rat was sitting on his chest trying to get his bottle. And one was on my side. I flipped the rat off my son's chest, and I picked him up and I laid him on my chest. I didn't sleep for days. And I didn't know what to do either. I had nothing in me said go and call somebody to exterminate the place. I just knew that I was going to protect my children. And I was going to figure it out. So I did not sleep for days. And eventually my body couldn't take it anymore. And I ended up falling asleep. And I never experienced that again. But I definitely had experiences where rats were crawling up my walls, right? Rats were crawling up my walls, and definitely all over the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle blankets, and me just really being afraid and really freaking out and trying to figure out what can I do.
I remember one particular time, her lights was turned off, and I went around, and I was going every day. When I got there, she didn't want to open the door, and that had never happened before, so I didn't know what was going on. And so when I walked in, she typically was very honest with me. Like we had a very honest friendship. Even to this day, we're very honest about everything. And so that was the first time I think she actually tried to lie to me. She told me that it was an outage in the area because she was always very smart. And when I looked around, it was like at night, everybody's lights were on but hers. And I was like, dang, I've never seen an outage when it's just one house that's out. So she was like, yeah, they're coming back. You know, I called BG&E, which is the electric company, and she said, I called them and they're coming back. They're gonna come and fix it. So I said, okay. I didn't think anything of it. Stayed there with her, listening to my friend. The next day I get up, I'm like, they still haven't fixed it, but everybody else is like moseying along. So I come back later that night, same thing. No lights, no nothing. So at this point, we're like burning candles inside of the place. She has, at this time, 2 children. So she came to my house. She stayed at my house with me until, like for a few days, until her electricity was able to be turned on. My mom had given her some information to go to get some resources to get some help to get it turned on or whatever.
Like I said, going back to her apartment on Myrtle Avenue, that was a impact. That was a smack in the face. And I wanted her to come back home, but Kitty had this little willpower thing about herself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this without others helping me. I'm going to show y'all I can do it. And what can I say at the end? She showed everybody. I'm so proud of her. That's Lord, I'm proud. So recently I heard Will Smith say something really awesome. He said, you have to learn how to fight and defend yourself from predators without letting your heart go dark. That was a very profound and real statement for me, because it seemed like all my life I was dealing with predators, and all my life I was constantly trying to figure out how to defend myself, right? And I have to admit that, for a long time I was in a very dark space. I was angry and I had this negative energy about myself, and I just felt like it was me against the world in my Tupac voice, and the world was full of mean, cruel, and horrible people. Family, church, men, all horrible people in my eyes at that point, right? However, as I began to experience life on my own as a teen mother of 2 boys, I have to say that I am so thankful that I allowed myself to open up to a few people who seemed to see me for who I really was, right? They didn't judge me, give me mean looks or stares. They didn't point their fingers at me or talk about me behind my back. In fact, it was the exact opposite, thank goodness. People like Dante and Jasmine and Dorikas and Quentin, Alicia, Tisha, Tina, Dawn, Kizzy, the entire Robinson family, and my Aunt Tammy, of course. They all became a very strong soundboard for me. They saw me for me, they saw my potential, and I know that they genuinely cared about me and my well-being, about my children's well-being. And that really helped me to understand how to juggle life. Those beautiful souls gave me hope. And along with my children, they gave me strength and the power to keep moving every day. So recently, my trainer asked me, Dee, how are you still able to love men after all the things that have happened to you? And at first, I really didn't even know how to answer that question. But after really thinking about my past, I would say that it definitely had to do with that drug dealer who helped me when I had my first apartment. And I say that because he showed me something so valuable. He showed me that not all men are out to hurt me. That a man, a complete stranger, wanted nothing from me but to see me succeed. He didn't ask for anything in return. Up until that point, I don't think I had really met anybody like that. And to be honest, when I met him, I could tell he was a good guy. I felt safe. And not only did he protect me without wanting anything from me in return, he also ensured my safety while living in that crazy ass neighborhood. But that was just the beginning for me. When I saw that, I knew that he wasn't the only one, right? So going back to Myrtle Avenue, shortly after the rat incidents, and I had more than one naturally, right? I have to admit that I felt so defeated. I was unhappy. Rather, I was happy about being on my own, knowing that I could control my own destiny. But the question was, what was my destiny? I was a teen mom on welfare. By this time, I had dropped out of school, 10th grade, and I was broke. I looked around me and the girls that I saw were like happy with this lifestyle. They enjoyed being on Section 8, getting welfare and food stamps. They almost made it seem like it was cool, like it was a great thing. And while I was thankful for that help, I kept wondering if there was something more for me in particular. I saw the guys on the block selling drugs. They were on drugs or being killed over drugs. And I began to wonder if that was the life that my boys would end up living. I also began wondering if there was something more for my boys in life and if I had the power to control that, right? Because when you live with rats and have very little resources, it really makes you look at life differently. So one day, I was walking down Martin Luther King Boulevard, pushing EJ in a stroller in one hand and holding Lionel's hand with the other, and I began to notice something. I noticed that there were a number of cars passing by me, and that these people weren't walking like I was. They were driving. And not only were they driving, but they were driving nice cars. And for some reason, on this particular day, I kept seeing people driving Mercedes-Benz. And I began to wonder, what are these people doing? What are they doing for a living? How are they able to afford this type of car? What's the formula? I know they're not drug dealers. What's the secret formula, right? So that's when it kind of hit me. If I want to create a life to take care of me and my family, I have 2 options. I can either let my circumstances define me, or I can define my own circumstances. Hell, I had already been doing that the whole time, right?
She never let the fact that she had children at her age stop her from doing what she needed to do. You know how some people use that as a crutch, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. I got kids to take care of. Y'all don't understand. I got kids. No. Them kids are the ones who made her get to where she is today. So, yeah.
She kept moving forward. She didn't let that deter her from accomplishing anything that she was determined to accomplish.
So as I'm watching these cars pass by me, I decided that I didn't want to walk anymore. I decided that I didn't want to catch the bus, that I didn't want to live in my current place anymore. I didn't want to be broke, and I didn't want to be a nobody. I didn't want my children to be drug dealers and end up in jail or dead, and I damn sure well didn't want to be a hood rat living on welfare as a statistic. So on that day, in that very moment in time, I made a conscious decision that I was going to do whatever it took for me to see myself in a different situation, to see my children in a different situation. And I couldn't explain it then, but something inside of me just snapped, you know? It just like felt like this burning flame that fully engulfed my body down to my very soul. And I said aloud with conviction, this is not who I am or who I desire to be when I grow up. And I do not want my kids to experience this either. I'm going to move, get off welfare, get a job, buy me one of those Mercedes Benz. Today, I call that feeling individual audacity.
Having been through some of the things that Dee has been through and experienced some of the things that she's experienced, many people never make that commitment. The commitment to changing their life, the commitment to digging out of a hole that typically people never have the opportunity to get out of. And so the drive, the determination, the grit, the refusal to give up, and the commitment to changing her life is something that many people don't achieve.
So anyway, I hopped on the bus with my 2 children and I went to the library to figure out like what my options were, like what can I do? And I'll say that that day in itself was such a defining moment for me. It was actually one of the biggest life-changing moments for me, you know? And it impacted me so much that within 3 months, I had moved into a better apartment, got off welfare. I landed my first real job making over $10 an hour, you know? And I was realizing that I had the power to make deliberate decisions for me and my family to define my future at all costs. That's what I did. It was the best thing I could have ever done for myself, you know?
Kitty didn't feel comfortable. And I knew that something had clicked. It had clicked where she was going to do better. And she did. She did much better. And wherever she went, she took them kids. She had them babies with her. And she took care of her children. She did very well. But like I said, when I saw the big spin, when Kitty had got a job and she got in touch with me, and I'm like, where you working at? And she was telling me about her job and what she was doing. And I was like, wow. And this was before she got into what she's into now. She always had a mind to do good, like go higher.
So with that being said, you know, getting a taste of the working world was cool. And, you know, while this wasn't my first job, I do have to admit that receiving bigger checks than I did on welfare was freaking awesome, right? But after a while, I began to wonder, would that be enough for me to really get my Mercedes Benz? It seemed like, you know, I would need to work a gazillion hours to be able to save up for that car. So I started looking for other options as far as employment, right? I got fired from my little job I had, and then I headed back to the library, and I found out that I could work at something called a temp agency. And this agency finds people jobs, you know what I'm saying? So I called a temp agency, made an appointment, got Tina to watch my boys, and I showed up for my interview.
She has always had a work ethic and has had odd jobs, you know. As soon as she was able to get a work permit, I remember her getting, you know, jobs here and there. So I was really a bit taken aback and inspired that she is actually out here working at 15 and 16. And sometimes my grandmom would have the baby babysitting her son just so that she could go to work.
I was about 17 at this point. I just turned 17. And I really done a good job from like hiding my age from the world. Don't ask questions. But they brought me in, had me fill out an application. I took the test on a computer to see what my skills were with Microsoft Office. Needless to say, failed the test, didn't get a job, right? So I asked the lady, what type of score do I need to have on this test in order for me to get a job? And she told me 80% or higher. So I asked her if I could get a copy of my test. She gave it to me, and I left. So then I spent the next few weeks taking like this 45-minute bus ride to the Towson Library every day of the week with my two boys. And I did this to practice Microsoft Office so that I could pass this test. And I would be there like first thing in the morning when the doors open, and I would not leave until the library closed. And looking back now, I was freaking relentless with my mission. So much that God sent me another angel, just like the drug dealer who had helped me before.
Another thing that inspired me about you, you always wanted to work.
Yeah.
You never wanted to lay down and just chill and collect checks. You went out, you worked, you, Dawn, and Kizzy.
Yeah.
Y'all can't even talk about you without adding You all always wanted to work, and all of y'all doing very well.
Yeah.
And I'm happy, I'm proud.
Yeah. So one day, I'm at the library. EJ was in a stroller crying like crazy, right? He wouldn't stop crying. And I had really ran out of money and food for the day, but I didn't want to leave the library until it closed. Well, this little old white lady working at the library walked over to me, and she asked me how old I was and if these were my children. And so I told her yes. Then she asked me, like, where are your parents? I told her I didn't have any. I was very staunch about that, right? She asked me, like, what are you doing here every day with these kids? I told her that I was trying to get a temp job as a receptionist, but every time I go to the agency, I failed the Microsoft Office test. So I showed her my test scores. So she looked at me and she asked me again, are these your children? I replied, yes, ma'am. She told me, okay, you sit right here. So then she walked away and she came back with some crackers and some juice in her hand for me and the boys. She said, I've been watching you come up here over the last couple of weeks. Take this food, go home, and be back up here first thing tomorrow morning, and don't be late. Now, you can only imagine that I was freaking paranoid, right? I had no clue what she was planning. And a part of me was like, do not go back to that library. This could be a setup. She's going to try to take your kids away. And during the whole bus ride home, I was like, oh my God, what's my next move? But I decided that I would go. And if I needed to run, I knew I was fast and I could get away if I needed to. So not really knowing what to expect, the next day, I went back to the library first thing in the morning. And it was really surprising that her and the staff were almost at the door waiting for me and the boys. And one of the ladies took the boys to the back section of the library, and then she took me to the computer section. And for the next 30 days or so, she worked with me literally every day and helped me master Microsoft Office until I passed the test and got a job paying $13 an hour.
So I'm a person of strong faith, and I do believe that we're destined for certain things. I've always believed that Kitty was destined for greatness. Even in growing up, she's worked from being a young teen, probably 14, 15, 16, we worked summer jobs, but she had a job outside of school because she had a child.
So that was just an amazing, opportunity. And it was also another confirmation that everyone that I come in contact with is not a bad person. There are some horrible people out there that are 100% looking to hurt. But there are also some people out there that are absolutely phenomenal. And I have come across many of those people in my lifetime, and they have shown me how to be an amazing person. So whenever I have an opportunity to stretch my hand out and to help someone, I try to do so, because there are people who have literally taken the time to hold their hands out and extend themselves to me and my boys.
Okay, I remember when I was before the age of 5, and me and my creator, we would go out, and we would go just to the mall, just go get something to eat, and all I knew is we was rushing home because Batman and Spider-Man was coming on, and that was something, and X-Men, that was something we was just into, so we'd be rushing home just to go home and watch it. And, we'd eat and we'd watch TV. And this is something that we had been doing for years. Me and her, we was a tag team. We was going at it together. And then my brother came. So we had a third addition to the family. And it was still cool. It was all of us. And nothing really changed until I was about to turn 5. And I had to leave her. And I was going with Dee Williams. And Josephine, she would take care of me for the next few years.
So I'm 17. I moved to Washington, D.C. to get out of Baltimore. And I asked my great aunt to keep my son while I went back to school to get my GED. And, back in the day, you go to your grandmother's house, you live with your grandma. It's not a big deal. Well, my great aunt decided that I needed paperwork involved in order for her to get my son into school. And so she called me and she said, I'll keep him. And, but you got to sign this paper so that we can get him into school. And I said, okay, that's fine. So we go into this office and she says, listen, this paper is just so that we can get him into school. It's not a big deal. And I said, okay, I trust you. And I put my signature on the paper. I didn't read the paper at all. I just signed it. Trusting her. Picked up my little son, and my oldest son stayed at my aunt's house. And me and my youngest son moved to Buffalo, New York. Stayed there for a month and a half. Realized I was thinking something's not right. I'm always calling my son, but she was always saying he was asleep, or he was at school, or he was taking a bath, or he was eating. Then another month and a half, goes by. I moved back to Baltimore. And I send my youngest son to my mom's because I never got my GED. It wasn't working right. And one day I got really sick, or I felt sick. I felt sick on the inside. I was like, oh, something's not right. What's going on? And something just hit me. I realized I haven't talked to my son in 3 months. So I called her again and she said, oh, he's in the tub. I said, I don't care. Let me speak to him. And she says, well, like I said, I said, let me speak to him now. Put him on the phone now. Now, put him on the phone. And she said, no. And I said, why? And she said, because he's no longer your son. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, that is my son. She said, he's not your son anymore. He's my son. And I said, no, ma'am, that's my son. She said, you signed the papers. He's my son. And I hung up the phone immediately. And I had this box. And I went, this box of papers, I like fumbling through the box, pulling papers, pulling them out the box. I go and look at the piece of paper and I read it. And I had given away my son. I had given custody away. I'm like reading. And I had given the way I looked at it, and I understood at that moment in time.
I didn't know what was happening behind the scenes of this event, but I eventually did find out.
Funny thing is that she was telling my son I didn't love her. That the reason why I gave him away was because I didn't love him. And he never knew until he got older that every day I harassed this lady every day. Let me speak to him, let me speak to him. What church you going to this week? She would tell me, and I would go to the church, and she would go to another one. Then I would ask her the next week, what church you going this week? She would tell me, I would go to that one, and she would tell me another one. So I finally started figuring out her patterns. And I asked her one day, what church you going to? And she told me, so I went to the opposite church, and she was there with my baby. And I came with gifts in hand. And I walk up to him, I'm darn near in like tears. And I walk up to him and I'm like, Lionel, and I'm like ready to hug him, and he was so mean to me. And he says, so you decided to finally come? I said, what are you talking about? I've been calling, I've been coming every week. I mean, I'm like trying to explain to him, he's a little boy. Every week I'm trying to come, it's like, you haven't been looking for me. You don't love me. I was like, heartbroken. I can't even tell you. So, thanks for watching. Like the video and subscribe, okay? There's more to come.